Welcome to Beyond 2020, a project of the Nebraska Optometric Association. This week we have Dr. Will Ferguson of Heartland Eye Consultants out of Omaha, Nebraska, visiting with us. And our topic is sports vision. Sports vision is a category of eye care that not a lot of people are familiar with. And Will, kind of give us a little rundown of your background just and how you got interested in sports vision and kind of your thoughts on where that fits within just general eye healthcare.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a good question, Drew. Well, as an athlete, growing up, just an interest in sports in general, but then as an optometrist, you can't really be anywhere in eye care, as an optometrist without getting into sports vision in some realm or capacity, So, and I think a lot of times, it starts with just the basic eye exam by an optometrist where you're doing all the exam elements, you're assessing eye health, depth perception, getting the correct eyewear for whatever sport the person's wearing to make sure that you have some protective eyewear or you have switching somebody into contact lenses or something like that. So I feel like optometry in general as a profession does a really good job of doing a lot of things for sports vision, even if you're not technically some sort of expert or something in sports vision. I certainly wouldn't, call myself an expert in sports vision, but I have, to get to your point about what I do in practice is I've kind of specialized down my practice to just treating disorders of visual development or visual perceptual disorders that might affect learning, but then also sports vision training. So really trying to enhance people's vision from a perceptual or training standpoint. So
excellent. Well, kind of from a patient standpoint, let's maybe start with the idea of how a standard eye exam maybe affects you from a sports vision and the benefits of why might it be more beneficial to wear contact lenses when you're playing sports, if that's an option for a kiddo or a young person.
Yeah, exactly. I think the key is, and I think the differentiation for just glasses, would be, you're going to have dress frames, right, which are just the frames that you would wear around, and those are obviously ones that you don't want to wear for high impact sports or anything more than, maybe darts or something like that. Or if you consider chess like a mental sport, right, those are obviously good to go. But once you get into, sort of high activity sports, obviously like a swimmer, baseball player, if you have a high prescription, even if you have impact resistant sports glasses, you can have issues with wrap and warpage from your lenses. So getting in contact lenses can be pretty freeing from an athlete standpoint. It gives you better peripheral vision. There's a lot of perks to that, So
increased peripheral vision can correlate to increased reaction speed and things like that in terms of awareness, right?
Yep, chord awareness, spatial awareness, that sort of a thing. And
in the football world of Nebraska, seeing the hole if you're the running back to cut to the hole and those kind of things. All right.
Yep, you betcha.
When it does come to eyewear for young kids who maybe aren't ready for contact lenses, what kind of safety considerations would you take into account if you as a parent trying to make that decision? You mentioned the difference between dress and sportswear, but are there anything when it comes to lenses like transitions for sunlight exposure, things like that you would take into consideration?
Yeah, that's a good question. We at our office, since we specialize and mostly take referrals from other optometrists, we don't have an optical, so I bet you could probably answer that question almost even better than me. But yeah, you're right. Obviously, the transitions would be good to cut down on, lights and stuff. But I mean, what do you see, or what kind of styles of frames could people find that are?
Yeah, I do get the question a lot myself. We always want to make sure it's an ANSI-resistant frame, and so a lot of people come in and ask about something like an Oakley frame, because that's a brand, of course, that people are familiar with. And there are regular Oakleys, and there are actually impact ballistic resistant Oakleys that you can use for baseball. Sports that I think about specific eyewear for probably comes more into those bat and ball sports, just with the speed, tennis, with the speed of the ball, racquetball, those kind of things. When it comes to helmeted sports, we got to look for a frame that'll fit under a helmet, if they can't wear contact lenses. But a lot of times when it comes to those sports frames, I do recommend transitions, because if they're a basketball player, they can wear them inside and they're clear, and if they're playing baseball, they can wear them outside and they get dark, right? And then if they play tournaments, they're dark during the day and they lighten by the end of the day, so that can kind of help. So
yeah, that's a good point. And I found too, even just calling optometrists, like, say you referred a patient for sports vision training, I often find that the doctors in the Omaha and Lincoln and surrounding areas, that the reason why I mentioned that demographic is that's usually the people that are willing to drive to Omaha, but all the other doctors in western Nebraska and the rest of the state are really phenomenal as well, as going through those options with people and trying to figure out what's best for that child for that sport. So
Sure.
I found there's a lot of really good optometrists in Nebraska that do that.
So Will, you were talking about glasses that protected the eyes, and so let's say you're wearing the glasses to protect the eyes, or let's say you're a person who does not need glasses, so you're not wearing them. Let's say you get hit in the head. How does that affect, well, not only a kiddo, I mean, that can affect adults too, but what kind of things do we need to be concerned about in those cases of sports injuries?
Yeah, the thing that pops into my mind is when I was younger, I'd hear people talk about, a boxer that went blind or something. I'm like, I wonder, why would that be? It like scratches on the front of their eye over time, but then as you go through optometry school, you realize, okay, the eyeball is a pretty tough structure, really, but at the same time, it is composed of, different layers, different structures that all have to work together. So if you get hit in the eye, it sends shock waves through your eye, and that can detach your retina, or it can disrupt certain layers. Like there was about 6 years ago, I was sitting on my couch, and someone knocks on the door, and I go over there, and are you an optometrist? I heard that you were an eye doctor. I was like, yeah, what's going on? Oh, my son got hit with a soccer ball in the face. I'm like, oh, poor guy, he's like 5, but what had happened was, I took a look at him, and you could see there was blood inside of his eye, so it had ripped one of the blood vessels inside of his eye, so definitely had to get him treated, but that's the thing is, you just never know. Like, say your kid's at the park, or they're out on the game and you saw something happen but you couldn't quite tell where they got hit. It's probably best to go in and see your optometrist, get a dilated exam just to make sure that there's nothing going on, especially if you have blurry vision, painful eye, any sort of like flashes or floaters in your vision, or just anything abnormal. Just don't be the typical tough guy and sweep it under the rug. Like, definitely get your vision checked out, because a lot of those things, if you treat them urgently, they can be taken care of. So. And
that kind of goes along the lines too. I mean, a soccer ball is pretty big, a basketball is pretty big. So besides even hitting the eyeball itself, this is also where concussions and vision can kind of intersect a little bit too, and may need to get checked out a little bit further on that.
Yeah, even on injuries that you just they didn't seem that bad. They seemed like a normal head-to-head collision, or you didn't even look like he hit the back of his head, but sometimes just whiplash alone, so watch for changes in your child's or adult, or whoever, your thinking patterns, your sleeping patterns, your dizziness, light sensitivity, foggy thinking, those types of things are super important to pay attention to, and then consult with your local optometrist as soon as you can for an evaluation,
Excellent. Yeah, that's a good idea. Well, once you get past kind of you're just taking care of your eyes and making sure you're seeing, right? That's the first key component, because there's a lot of kiddos out there that don't know to express to their parents that they can't see.
And maybe they've always had one eye that's blurry or both eyes that are blurry, just don't know any different.
Yeah, you've had plenty of these, but as an example from patients to be kind of aware of, I've had a patient come in who was pretty successful, 13-year-old basketball player, was progressing up through kind of select sports, and came in for a first eye exam, covered up her right eye, and couldn't see better than 2100 out of her left eye. So,
yeah, isn't that amazing?
But still made it pretty far, but once we got it taken care of with a vision specialist such as yourself, she was doing better. So moving into kind of more of the specific sports vision, I think that's a concept that a lot of people don't necessarily understand. What are we talking about, right? And so I might share a couple of stories that I am aware of that kind of illustrate it, and then if you could kind of get into maybe a little bit more of how you would go about working with a patient to develop those kind of things. So one of them I think I've talked to you about before was a book that was talking about Albert Pujols and his hand-eye coordination and how fast he could hit, and it was talking about testing him in a hand-eye coordination setting compared with high school students. And when it was in a regular gymnasium setting, basically he kind of tested in the middle of the pack with hand-eye coordination, but then when they did the same type of test but in a baseball setting, he of course shot to the top of the chart with his reaction speed and whatnot. And so I think a lot of parents are like, well, if my kid can see, why would we think about sports vision? So how would you explain that to them? Like, why would someone want to do more beyond just seeing 20/20?
Yeah, that's a good question. That's a big question too, you know. I think a lot of athletes, you got to kind of look at, I guess, what is their end goal? You know, like how seriously are they taking things? You know, with the younger kids, I would say what you're going to do is you're going to more of just take care of all the things that we just talked about, and then when you get them into, say, a sports training scenario, what you're going to try to do is just get them to understand their vision. You know, simple activities that just show them, okay, not everything in the room is clear at once. It depends on where you're putting your vision, you know. So skills like eye movements and eye focusing and eye teaming, you know, that's what's going to govern how well you can like pick up a baseball out of a pitcher's hand, you know. So
sure.
What we do is we do tests that would evaluate how well does the person seem to do that.
Sure.
And then in the training scenario, a lot of times you can find deficits that you don't know exist, and then you can actually train those specific visual deficits. Like as an example, there might be a patient who has trouble converging their eyes. So they have trouble using their eyes together as a team, which is then going to affect their depth perception and then tracking a ball. So you might kind of fix a deficit by speeding up their vision, making it more accurate so they can track better.
Sure.
And in the process, I always think it's fun to talk to the kids about, all right, when someone yells, say, for instance, keep your eye on the ball, you know, what does that exactly mean, though? And oftentimes, they don't really know what that means. Of course, they're trying to do that, but the point of the training is that, okay, you're putting them in a situation where you're training a specific skill that you're using feedback for. So kind of like, say, you're training speech therapy. Mm-hmm. Someone has a lisp, so where their tongue goes, they produce the wrong sound, you know?
Sure.
But what we do is set up scenarios where, okay, you're going to try to get this chart clear, but if you can't, you'll be able to see that. But we have to figure out, where is your vision? Is your vision going too far past it, or is it getting stuck too short of it?
Oh, sure.
And then you kind of work on those sort of errors and fudge them out of the system, just like you would
sure.
just a speech impediment or something like that. And then what you do is you speed up their vision and teach them in the process of keeping your eye on the ball. You know, it means an action to them. It's something that they feel like they can do and they're in control of, you know?
So kind of another scenario I'd kind of read about was a test that was talking about pitch location and to your point of keeping your eye on the ball, and people talk about seeing the stitches coming out of out of the pitcher's hand. Well, if you actually do the computation on milliseconds of response and things like that at a major league level, at least the ball's already gone probably roughly 30 feet by the time our brain registers what's happening. And so the testing they did for that one to demonstrate how peripheral vision kind of comes into play, even though we're thinking we're looking at this ball, right, was that they took a video and edited out the pitcher's arm, and then the players had to predict location of the pitch, and they were able to still do that at, I think it was around a 95% accuracy rate without seeing the arm. So that points to the fact that the peripheral vision, like you're talking about, our brain uses that almost subconsciously to help us figure out reaction time. So one of the tests, just because I've been watching the F1 show that's on Netflix right now, and you see these drivers in the background getting ready for races, and it's this lineup of lights, and they stand in front of it, and the lights start going off, and they start slapping the lights as they go, and they're looking straight ahead. So is that training peripheral vision reaction time, which obviously when they're driving they're not slapping lights, but they have to be able to pick up the next corner in their peripheral view? Is that what they're trying to train there?
I would say, yeah. I mean, the biggest thing that you're trying to train there is, visual reaction time, and your reaction time is going to be better when you can spread your attention between your central vision and your peripheral vision. So some police officers will do certain training techniques where in a high-speed chase or they're trying to get across town. That's an emotional situation. And typically your brain resorts to get the most amount of information from your central vision under stressful situations. So what they're trying to do there is the police officers would do a peripheral eye movement activity to kind of break them out of that cycle where your emotional state might influence your processing.
Sure.
So with an athlete like that, it would be important to just run through that technique just at a whatever level that they can, but it's important to also stop and talk to them about, where do you feel like your attention is more to the right, more to the left, where is your reaction time? And then you can actually, on some of those tests, kind of measure where you're the most accurate, where you're the least accurate, and you can use that to your advantage for training an athlete. So,
which probably, I mean, almost every sport, from having that peripheral awareness, I mean, that's a huge corollary to success, right? I mean,
honestly, even things you wouldn't think of like swimming, You know what I mean? You know, the fastest way to get from A to B is a straight line, right? So you're in the midst of like trying to, keep your strokes and hit all your spots and, you know, that sort of thing. But then just having just a little bit more of an awareness for your peripheral vision to see where the lines are on the pool and those sorts of things.
Sure.
You know, that's really often the blend between your central vision and your peripheral vision, not only on the, sort of x-axis and y-axis, but that z-axis is what gives you peripheral vision, that simultaneous awareness. So I think that's a lot of times what we're trying to train is an athlete's ability to sort of be able to be adaptable. You know, your ability to adapt is dependent upon your ability to recognize an error, sort of understand what went into that error so that you can predict how to not make it again.
Right.
And then, so you're trying to almost in some ways teach the person how to do that with their visual system. And hopefully, every athlete comes at that at a different level. You know, some people are just inherently good at that. You just need to kind of put them in the situation and they learn. So others, you try to bring them towards that sort of.
So kind of simplify, you're taking a person who's maybe performing no matter what level, to them it's a high stress or high functioning situation, and you're trying to teach them how to operate without that tunnel vision and kind of expand it out. And so when maybe you're watching on TV and they're talking about court awareness for a basketball player, and the point guard who's making these amazing passes to this guy cutting clear out on the wing, you know, and seeing it, those are kind of the skill sets that the practical skill set then that comes from training your peripheral vision, peripheral awareness as you're going along.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And as you can imagine too, you know, in training, your goal is to do a lot of thinking in training and do a lot of talking and analysis. But once you start to refine that process, you train it until it becomes just automatic, so that when you're in a high stress situation, that doesn't turn into like negative energy, so to speak. It turns into focused energy, but your vision doesn't get too collapsed, you know. So you kind of learn how to focus under that pressure visually, so it doesn't own you. You know, you kind of control it, so to speak. So
and very cool. So if you could kind of explain, is there a setup? Do you have to be on a field to do sports vision? Do you have to be in a gym to do sports vision, or is that something you can actually, you know, do within a clinic setting? Do you have to have a special facility for that?
Yeah, you don't necessarily need a special facility. Obviously, the more you can simulate the field environment, the better. Just because, you know, part of your central and peripheral vision that we're talking about, you know, different backgrounds are going to make it harder to pick up, say, a ball in baseball. Or, you know, it's probably going to be different playing tennis on clay versus grass or something like that. So the visual environments are interesting. You want sort of variability in that training, but in the office when you're trying to teach that awareness to the athlete, you can do it pretty much anywhere. Yeah, you don't need a big room. You don't need anything fancy. You just need a willing participant, and everyone giving their best effort for that one person. You know, so.
So another test that I have participated in is kind of, I guess I would call it visual memory, but the example is a setup where there is a LED line of numbers that flash up, and they start with like 3 numbers, go to 4 numbers, and they flash up for a few seconds, go away, and then you have to repeat what you saw. Then they get up to 5 numbers, 6 numbers. How does that type of thing correlate to maybe something that would be used on the field or on the court?
Yeah, that's a really good question. A lot of people don't think of that. A lot of athletes don't think of that. A lot of training facilities don't. But that tachistoscopic presentation, what you're trying to do is don't think. It shows up, you take in as much information as you can. Sometimes you have to chunk it or compartmentalize it, because if you get 6 things popping up in 0.3 seconds, you know, you have to be able to either take in the whole thing or take in some, like 4 versus 2, 3 sets of 2, you know, 2 sets of 3, whatever. But what you're trying to get at is, when you were saying they would remove the pitcher's arm, what you're using is advanced clues. You know, like if someone's throwing up a ball to hit it in tennis, their body is going to be something that gives a high-level athlete clues. That's based off of perceptual memory. And the more you can act off of perceptual memory, the less you're thinking and the more you're just responding. But it's trying to get at that. So again, you just train the skill over and over to get the patient good at it, aware of it, and then you point out how they might use that in sports, and then they kind of work with their coaches. Because, you know, I might not always know the advanced clues that like the high level athletes in that sport are picking up on. So I feel like I learn a lot from the patients there too, you know, so.
So 2 examples maybe that are practical. One is watching football, and they talk about a quarterback going through their reads. Well, if they're doing like a 3-step drop or 5-step drop, that's pretty fast, but they're picking up where 3 or 4 guys are running routes. I mean, I would assume that's kind of that similar thing. They're trying to pay attention to both sides.
Yeah.
And then going back to youth sports, when they were teaching you defense and they were telling you to watch the belt buckle when you're playing defense on basketball, you're looking at the belt buckle because that's hard to fake out, but that you're still using your peripheral vision. Are those kind of 2 applicable ways? Yeah,
those are really good examples. Yeah. Gosh, there's so many. It just kind of depends. It just depends on the sport, and it just depends on what level they're at, you know, what age level, and how specific you need to be with that, you know. So
this also probably is applicable to esports, right? I mean, in terms of playing video games.
That is an interesting thing. Yes.
How would you?
So esports, yes. So people that are those high-level gamers, that, I mean, talk about reaction time,
right,
and sustaining visual attention. I would say one other little branch of what we're talking about there with those types of people is you want to try to teach the ability to turn the focus on and turn it off. And so that's something that oftentimes I find lies within the athlete themselves as to how well they do that, but you try to work with the personality that they have. If they're kind of more high-strung and impatient, that's going to be different than somebody who's a little more relaxed and they need sort of external motivation to kind of get up more, you know. So, but the idea there is to not constantly be at a high level that's you're almost overexerting yourself. You want vision working so automatically and quickly that it's back to a sort of a low level, but super efficient. So an example that correlates to both of those, they've done some looking at eye movement patterns with chess players. So chess players, you would think their memory is just unbelievable because what they would do is they would look at a board, like you said, that would just like present and go away. And they could like replace all the pieces on the board versus a novice player like me. I mean, I played chess maybe like 10 times. I'd get maybe like a couple of them, and I don't even know the names. Like there was like the pawns, that's what I know, you know. I can't even tell the difference between a king and a queen, you know. But what the good players were doing is they immediately saw context, and they immediately saw what was going on the field. So they did the same thing with, I believe it was soccer players too. So really good high-level soccer players, they see a flash of it, and they can see how the play is going to develop.
Sure.
You know, someone like Wayne Gretzky was said to be able to be just unbelievable at that, you know, for hockey. So
almost like they see the swarm.
Yeah.
They see the swarm of players moving and where the momentum's going, and that gets, in soccer terms, a run down the sideline.
Yeah, exactly. So just, you know, and the more you talk about that with kids and the more that they can try to focus on that, say you're bringing the ball down the court, right, and you're dribbling down, like you said, to see where space is collapsing, and that means if space collapses here, you don't just focus on that. That means something's expanding out here.
Sure.
You know?
Sure.
So that's when you're looking for your teammate to go out that way, you know. So
very cool. Well, yeah, I think it's something that we talk about, or that seems somewhat to make sense to us, but then when you're trying to talk to a parent or bring up the idea of sports vision, or even if they just have questions about how that's affecting their kids' abilities on the field, I think it's important to understand that yes, we can go to correcting your prescription, but then there is some higher level things that you can think about. You know, we go train ourselves, we go pay a trainer to get us in shape, we go pay a flexibility coach to help work with us on flexibility.
Work with your sleep.
Sleep, coaching, stuff like that. But we don't think about, okay, what's beyond just putting glasses on or putting contacts on. And I think with my patients, one of the things, even though I don't spend as much time in this part of the world as you do, it's the idea that really it's our brain that sees.
Yep.
You know, most people think it's my eyes are what sees, but your eyes are just the sensor. And there's a lot going on inside your brain.
There's a lot going on under
to
the
make
hood,
that picture work, right?
Yep.
So hopefully we can kind of get some more awareness of that and get the word out there within not only our state, but also, of course, just across the country and across the world. And I think there are places that are doing a good job of that. So, well, thank you for joining us for this episode.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's great. It's great. We're, again, lucky to have you guys in Omaha as a good resource to work with and get patients to. So
Yeah,
we appreciate it.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Well, thank you for joining us for this episode of Beyond 2020. If you have any questions on sports vision, please reach out to your local optometrist or reach out to the Nebraska Optometric Association, and we can try to get you the resources necessary. We also would like to give a thanks to the Nebraska Optometric Association and the Executive Director, Dave McBride, Beyond 2020 producer, Christian Anderson with Right Eye Digital, Parsons Public Relations. We do want to encourage everybody to look for the latest episode of Beyond 2020 at bettereyecarenebraska.com, on the NOA YouTube channel, and all your favorite podcast platforms, and also follow us on Facebook. If you have questions, please contact us at Nebraska Optometric Association. Until next time, thanks for watching and listening.